this roster constructed the way that it is, has as good a chance as any, and I think is in a much better position from a top-end talent and depth perception? That's not the word I was looking for. From a depth perspective. There you go. Welcome to this.
Is anyone else pissed off that the Patriots are there again? Congratulations, but everyone else hates you guys.
Episode of the Maza's Musings podcast. Well, get used to it because the Patriots are back. Yep, they just completed their trade for A.J. Brown, sending a first-round pick in 2028 and a fifth-round pick next year to the Philadelphia Eagles. And to talk with me about that and how this year's team is shaping up, plus some other Boston sports and New England sports related topics, is Greg Cameron once again. And Greg and I will go over some of the things that we talked about when we were projecting the NFL draft and through where we are now, and kind of taking a look at where this team is and how it stacks up with the rest of the league. And of course, we'll talk about the Red Sox because, well, we kind of have to. And we talk about, the early exits for the Boston Bruins and the Boston Celtics. So we're going to have some fun. It's going to be mostly upbeat, I promise you. And to help keep us upbeat heading into our main topic, we will have Meghan with her Cuckoo Bananas Joke of the Week.
And now it's time for Meghan's
Cuckoo Bananas Joke.
Hi, Meghan.
Hi.
Why do you keep trying to start the podcast before I am ready?
Because I like to.
Because you like to?
Yes.
Okay, well, what I like to do is hear a joke. So, do you have a joke for us today? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it then. Not whistling. Joke.
What do maple trees say on Easter?
I don't know. What do maple trees say on Easter?
Happy Easter!
Good one.
Because maple syrup is made of sap with a little sugar. And maple trees give the sap.
Oh.
Happy New Year.
Okay.
The maple trees.
Time to say goodnight.
Good night.
Okay, so I said that the joke was going to lead us into the main topic. Well, okay, I lied because we do have our Maza's Mickey Minute for this week.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra.
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
And here we go!
Okay, so it was not hard to pick a topic for this week's Maza's Mickey Minute because living in the household that I do, I pretty much would have been, excommunicated from the family if I didn't discuss this. And that, of course, is Taylor Swift and her involvement with Toy Story 5. Now, you already have my opinion from past episodes about what I think about extending Toy Story past Toy Story 3. But here we are, so we'll look at this from the standpoint of it's here, it's happening, nothing we can do about it. So, if you have been living under a rock, you hadn't noticed that there had been all kinds of Easter eggs and things like that, kind of hinting that Taylor Swift might have some kind of involvement with the new Toy Story movie. Well, it all culminated with 13 billboards all around the world, with TS and like the Toy Story kind of lettering and everything all over the world. And it ultimately ended up with a countdown on her website. So congratulations, Taylor Swift. You got me to go to your website. Bravo. And it was for maybe the second most anticlimactic thing that has happened recently. The first probably being the AJ Brown trade. And that is that Taylor Swift announced that she was going to have a song on the album. It is called, I just had it. Where'd it go? Oh boy. It is called I Knew It, I Knew You. And she announced it on June 1st. And well, it was originally, there was a pre-order thing where you could buy singles, CD singles. I didn't even know they still did that. It felt like 1996 all over again. And you could buy those for, I think it was $4 a piece, $3.99. Well, they just also announced that you can buy a vinyl, and for 24 hours only. So actually, when you're listening to this, you can't buy a vinyl because it was for 24 hours only. And that was announced today when I'm recording this, which is Thursday. So you're pretty much probably out of luck if you're listening to this podcast. If you're listening early in the morning, you might have a chance. I don't know what the official countdown is for that. But you can go to our website and check it out and see if you will spend $25 on the vinyl for one of Taylor Swift's songs. Oh, excuse me. I'm seeing it right now. So they're only available on Taylor Swift's website for $24.99 each until 2 p.m. on Friday. So if you are listening Friday morning or Friday early afternoon, you may have a chance because it is while supplies last. Now, the song is also going to be available for digital download that you can pre-order for 99 cents. Man, this is just such honestly, a Disney move and a Taylor Swift move all wrapped into the same thing. Like trying to milk every dollar out of the most minuscule thing possible. I mean, you think about the amount of money that they've made off of Baby Yoda merchandise from people who have never heard Baby Yoda or never seen Baby Yoda. The number of people that are going to grasp at, something Taylor Swift. I swear that woman could put out 40 minutes of her own flatulence and people would buy it and consider it brilliant. That's not a diss on Taylor Swift. I have nothing against Taylor Swift. I just don't understand the phenomenon that is Taylor Swift. So I'll leave it at that. Obviously, there is a phenomenon. Otherwise, this all wouldn't be happening. But so that is this week's Maza's Mickey Minute. Go out and try your luck at getting your hands on one of these collectible things for Taylor Swift's single on the Toy Story soundtrack. If you are looking to take the head scratching and the guesswork out of your next vacation, you should contact We Do Travel Right. And We Do Travel Right has that one-on-one service of an agent, and that agent has a team behind them who is helping you get those hard to get dining reservations. They're helping you with your hotels, with your park tickets, with helping you navigate the ins and outs of the trip, and also helping you navigate your budget to make sure that it's the right trip for you and your family. And the best thing about We Do Travel Right is their services are free. That's right. You do not pay We Do Travel Right anything extra to use their services. That's because Disney or Universal or all-inclusives or cruise lines, they all build the use of an agent into their pricing. So you're paying for the agent already. So doesn't it just make sense to use something that you're already paying for? So if you are interested in getting your next magical vacation started today, head to wedotravelright.com/Maza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA.
Al, I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
All right, now let's get to our main topic of the week, where Greg and I will discuss all things New England sports. Okay, so I am here with Greg Cameron, and of course, the last time that we were here, we were talking about the NFL draft and the way we thought it was going to go, and we were kind of trying to project what the Patriots roster might look like at this point in the year. And I've seemed to recall during that conversation that we both were kind of the mind that we would take the AJ Brown of it all out of it when we were looking at this.
We did.
Well, here we are. We can no longer take the AJ Brown out of it because he is a Patriot, and at least I am. We really haven't had a lot of chance to talk about this, but I am pretty excited about it. As much as it was probably one of the most anticlimactic blockbusters you could ever see. You even kind of knew what the compensation was going to be a week before it happened.
Yeah.
Maybe the fact that there was a 5th round pick thrown in there was a little nugget of something new, but we kind of felt this coming. So, I thought that we would start off first by just kind of like looking at the trade as it is. So, looking at this trade, do you think that the price was right?
I do, and I'll give a shout out to my brother Drew, who, when we were talking about it, like I was sort of I had texted he and my sister-in-law about the Myles Garrett trade, which had happened earlier in the day, and I'm sure we'll talk about how bonkers and kind of awesome that trade is too, even though it's not a Patriots thing. But I was telling them about that, and then I was like, oh, today's probably the day that AJ Brown becomes a New England Patriot, finally. And my brother goes, what do you think they're going to give up? Like the 28 first and like a 5th? And I was like, yeah, that sounds right. So I kind of think, I always sort of think my older brother is a wizard, but when it comes to the trade compensation for this deal, he was dead nuts on. Like, it was a perfect prognostication. I'm glad it's not giving up the 27 first, because this year, or this upcoming year's draft is friggin' loaded. Is just loaded with so many really great players. And I wonder too, if this would have been a great draft for the old Belichick way of like, oh, you need a quarterback? Oh, come on knocking. What are you going to give us what are you going to give us to take, I'm trying to think of quarterback du jour who will be in this draft, oh, congratulations. You could take, you could use it to go get Arch Manning or go get any one of these guys. Cause if the Browns are going to be as bad as they are, there's no way that Arch Manning goes to Cleveland. So I think next year's draft is going to be very interesting for the Patriots. They're going to be able to fill some holes, which, looking at this roster, I don't quite know where some of the holes are. Maybe at guard. Maybe they'll need to kind of be looking at the right guard class for next year, but which would be a little bit, certainly not the sexiest move for them in terms of next year's draft, and then thinking about, kind of having the 28 draft in the first round wiped out. But I think for the Patriots, this is a very long-winded way to say I think the price was right. I think that they got the player that they wanted, and they were able to do so in a pretty price thrifty manner for a number one wide receiver.
No, yeah. I mean, the 2027 of it all, I felt it was very important to protect that for the reason that you said. And beyond that, you mentioned that you're not sure where the holes are going to be in the roster. Well, I mean, when you kind of look at it, there are several positions where, you don't have a lot under contract beyond 2027. So, especially with as talented as this draft is, I think that it's really important to preserve those picks and make them count. I'm not necessarily even in the school where they would necessarily want to or have to. Now we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but wouldn't have to or want to trade down, with that pick, try to entice somebody. Because first off, if things go right, they're going to be picking it in at least the high 20s.
Yeah.
In this draft, that can get you a pretty darn good player that you need and can apply towards your future, instead of, being like, kind of like this year where you're just like, the Patriots ended up trading up in that. But you don't,
No, I agree.
You wouldn't necessarily need to or want to trade down. You could, but we're getting a little bit too far out here. I think that there are a lot of positions, and I'm trying to pull it up and it's not coming up for me, but I had it for the last podcast we did. There are several positions where they're really lean after this year in terms of guys who are currently under contract. So I think that that's really important, as they've kind of been like, they've proven that they'll make these kinds of splashes, obviously with AJ Brown, but they're very much in draft and develop mode. So I think that makes this much more palatable. Now, I will say that the number of people who are just like, oh, it's a steal because, you're going to end up with, some guy who's not as good as AJ Brown if you're drafting in 2028. Well, you don't know that. You don't know that, and if you're basing it off of, previous end of the round picks that were made 10 years ago by a coach / GM who's no longer here, then it's not a great argument for you. I think that you wanted something valuable, so you had to give up something valuable. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that what you gave up was a significant piece.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Like it's not nothing to give up a first round pick, regardless of the draft. Like the Patriots historically haven't really done it all that much for a player. I'm trying to think one of the last ones. Maybe the last one that I can remember, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is Brandon Cooks in like 2015 or 16?
They traded, what did they trade Cooks for? It was a first round pick. It was like an end of the first round pick.
It was like the 27th pick.
And then they traded it the next year to recoup the first round pick.
Yeah.
Essentially. So they basically rented Brandon Cooks for a year. But yeah, I mean, from a compensation standpoint, that might be the closest comp, but there isn't really a great comp for this because Brandon Cooks is not the kind of receiver that
AJ Brown is.
And now, that's not to say that he's, that he was a stiff. I mean, he had over 1,000 yards, more than a handful of touchdowns, was really like the premier deep threat that they had for that team. So that was one that was well worth it, especially being able to trade him. They traded him to the Rams.
Sure did.
For a first and a sixth. So, that was really savvy, but like people have tried to compare this to like the Randy Moss trade, which is a completely different kind of deal. Both in all regards, but most specifically in regards to compensation. They give up a 4th round pick for Randy Moss, who at the time looked like was in serious decline, and turned out that it was, not Randy Moss at all. Yeah. But, you're not finding a great comparison for this. And I think that if you do, Brandon Cooks is probably a decent one from a sheer compensation standpoint. But in terms of the impact to the team, I think that you really have to look at this one as far more significant as well for what it means, for this offense and the quarterback. So let's get into that piece a little bit. It kind of really shifts the dynamic of what this offense looks like. You're all of a sudden now have AJ Brown and Romeo Doubs as your top two options. And those are both guys who can work inside out. So on top of everything else, you have a lot more of this kind of, offense that's a bit more amoebic. That's something that more usually applies to defense, but you've got these guys that you're able to move around the formation, and it's not just like, okay, this is your X, this is your Y, this is your Z. You're able to mix and match a little bit, and I think that that's really where Josh McDaniels thrives, in being able to move those pieces around the board and set up those mismatches. In a lot of cases, AJ Brown in and of himself is a mismatch. He doesn't necessarily have the speed he once had, but man, this guy, especially if you get him on the right corner, is going to have a field day. And he's another one of these big guys, big catch radius that really Drake May has shown he has a real affinity for throwing to, because his deep ball throwing is really accurate, but you look at the guys who he was throwing deep to, they're guys who can go get it if they have to. So, I think that there's a little bit of him, and there's a little bit of the guys that he's choosing to go downfield to. And then you look at the other pieces. The real question here is, how long is Kayshon Boutte going to stick around? I think that that's a case of there could just end up being a pick swap for him, because as much as people kind of looked at him, he was in a way wide receiver 1 on this team last year, even though Diggs was the guy who ended up with 1,000 yards. Boutte was the guy who was on the field the most, and he's the one who stands to lose the most here. But you look around the league, nobody seems to have been calling the Patriots on him, even though this trade has been the worst kept secret, So I think that there was more internal value with the Patriots last year with that player than there is league wide. I think league wide, they see him as a, league average player who the Patriots now kind of have to get rid of because of his redundancy in the offense. So why are you really going to extend for him?
Yeah, and it was interesting. I usually talk football with my colleague at work in our office, and we were talking about the idea of trading Kayshon Boutte, but where? It's interesting of the teams that are needy for wide receivers at this point. I almost wonder if that's a potentially training camp thing where someone goes down and then somebody gets desperate.
Yeah.
That
could be,
because it's interesting. I don't know, he's a very good player for what he is. Probably teams view him as a nice number 3. He's got kind of a high floor. For a guy who fell all the way to the 6th round, whereas at the beginning of that football season was a top 10, projected pick at that point. But I find it very interesting of a guy whose tape looks really good, that there are teams that aren't oh, we should go get that guy. It kind of doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, but you kind of look at it, and you look at his production and his stats last year, and this was a guy who was on the field for, he was on the field for, it was less than I thought. He was only on the field, this includes, he missed a couple of games. So he missed 3 games, so that dips this number down. But I was going to say, he was on the field for 67% of the Patriots' offensive snaps last year. I thought it was higher than that. And I think it's because he missed those games. The year before, he was at 79. I thought that was closer to that. Like he was closer to the top of that list for the team. But even with that, he's one of the tops in terms of snaps. Really played in all situations. And you're talking about a guy who had 500 yards. Good player.
Yeah.
Useful player. But again, is he somebody that you're extending for? And so I think there is a lot of wait and see from some of these teams. And seeing, if they have an injury themselves, or, the guy's not with the team right now. So they could be waiting to see what. Bit. Yeah. Because this hasn't been a secret to anybody. He's known what's been going on. So, and he knows that it's the role that he's been fulfilling. So, I think that he is one of the odd men out here. There are a lot of bodies in that room right now, and it's kind of interesting to see how this is all going to play out. I think that the team loves Mac Hollins, but he's a guy who could, find himself on the outside looking in. He does provide a little bit of something different. But then you look at, you've got the Kyle Williams. Do they see anything in him? Is that they need some speed because AJ Brown's not as fast as he used to be. And even then, truthfully, AJ Brown, plays a lot faster than he actually runs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even in his prime, he was one of those guys who, for his size, played a lot faster than he ran. And Romeo Doubs isn't a guy who's taking the top off the defense. You look at the tight ends that they have, none of them are burners. So you need that speed element. So you figure that he's going to be there. There's a role of some kind, you'd think, for Pop. So that's pretty full as it is right there, So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I kind of just thinking about it and looking at the depth chart as it stands, which the ESPN depth chart is very weird to a point that there is a young man named James Hudson III starting at left tackle right now. I didn't know we had a James Hudson III, but anyway, looking at this kind of wide receiver depth chart, they present it as 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, where your top wide receiver, your starters are Brown, Doubs, Booty, and then your second guys are Hollins, Douglas, Williams. And I just sort of wonder, it's the Patriots have kind of gone from a kind of barren wide receiver room to a pretty solid one over the course, with this trade here. And I think it's very interesting sort of internally where that depth chart looks like. The Patriots used Kyle Williams as one of the guys in the schedule leak video. Same with Pop Douglas, I think, was in that too. That it seems like the Patriots are really high on both of those guys. So it's very interesting to me, what does the organization think compared to what we think?
They're also personalities.
Totally.
Those are guys with personalities too. So I think that there's a little bit of that. The creative side of the organization, wants those guys that are gonna, pop.
Oh, yeah.
No pun intended.
I was gonna say, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I'm actually I've always been a bit higher on the Patriots wide receiver room than most. I think that if they had, I thought it was a professional room, and with an elite quarterback, which I believe Drake May can be. I think he's got to show out for one more year before we anoint him as, a truly, elite guy. But I think a professional room with an elite quarterback can do well. And I thought that maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty going from Diggs to Dobbs. Is there another level that Dobbs can get to, that will make it, that will actually advance the offense? Because they're both going to be playing a lot more. Now I'm looking at the Ourlads depth chart, which lists Dobbs playing the slot, which he did not play a lot when he was in Green Bay. But a lot of people seem to think he's more suited for that. And part of the reason why he played outside a lot was because of injuries elsewhere. So it's nice that you have a guy who can move both ways. But, yeah, the A.J. Brown of it all tips that scale and really makes it so this is a wide receiver room that is, I'd say, formidable, especially if you're able to slide guys into the right spots behind them. I do think that maybe they were anticipating doing a little bit more 12 personnel with just 2 receivers on the field. Then you've got Brown and Dobbs. And maybe some situations where, Hollins is in there blocking a little bit more. But now with Julian Hill's injury, does that throw that kind of, a little bit more so that they have to shift to more of those, 3 receiver kind of looks? All this will shake out a little bit more in training camp, et cetera, as we start whittling down, these rosters. But looking at the roster, especially the top end of the roster and some of the depth behind them, between this receiver room, the perceived improvements that they've made to the offensive line, I think that this is an offense that, and I thought the defense still has plenty of pieces, and the Gabe Akis, if he ever shows up, which is worrying me a little bit at this point. This, if it comes together the way we think it's going to come together, I would say that this roster stacks up pretty much as well as any other in the AFC. Now we can talk about some NFC teams that are out there, but in terms of this team going from a playoff team to a contender, I think that they in the AFC are much more in the contender category now.
I agree. Like they've improved, especially on the offensive line. Like I think they have depth now. They have depth that does not like frighten you a little bit. Like you have guys between, Elijah Vera Tucker and Michael Wainu, and then like there's a little bit of room between like a Caden Wallace type or a Ben Brown. Like I think they've done some of the right things with shoring up depth, certainly along the line. And then this defense is still really good on paper. Like it's going to be very interesting how they go about it, with a tougher schedule next year too. Yeah.
This could very well be a situation where they are a better team overall with a worse record because they do have a more difficult schedule. But at the same time, when you look at the schedule, we're not going to go through the schedule line by line, but there are some of the teams that ended up on that first place schedule this year. You kind of look at and you're just like, okay, this could have been worse. We'll put it that way. It could have been worse.
Could have been way worse.
You look at the AFC, it's some of it is circumstance. With the AFC, much like last year with their run, there was some fortune both in terms of their health, in terms of the schedule, and in terms of what happened with some of the other teams. You look at the circumstances surrounding some of the other teams that you would consider contenders. I mean, do you consider Kansas City a contender coming with, their quarterback coming off an ACL and questions about their roster and the legal the legal situations of some of their players? Honestly, I seriously wondered if Kansas City was one of those teams that might kind of like try to make a last ditch effort at an AJ Brown. You look at, Denver. Are you a believer in Denver?
I don't know.
You look at the Bills, who are a team with a great quarterback, didn't do very much to support him this offseason in terms of getting more talent around him. basically replaced their old coach with someone from the same regime who doesn't have coaching experience. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Not saying that
does.
that's going to be the same situation, but and you look at even Baltimore. Baltimore, for some reason, is in a lot of places favored to be the favorite in the AFC to go to the Super Bowl. And they didn't make the playoffs last year, and they are in a regime change. And you've got a quarterback who readily admitted that he had issues with his, I think it was his hamstring last year. He had nagging injuries all year. Is he going to stay healthy? Can the Bengals ever play defense and protect Joe Burrow? So there are questions surrounding the Patriots too. So I'm not making it sound like, the Patriots don't have any question marks. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that everybody does, especially in the AFC. They're more glaring. So you're talking about a team that, with this roster constructed the way that it is, has as good a chance as any, and I think is in a much better position from a top end talent and depth perception. That's not the word I was looking for. From a depth perspective. There you go. Than they were when they went to the Super Bowl, just a few months ago. That was just a few months ago.
I know.
So
you can count them on one hand.
And after that, we weren't that far off from the draft. And I gotta say, we did pretty well in kind of projecting how this was going to go. Bravo to you on the Gay Bacchus pick, by the way.
Absolutely.
That was we did pretty well for ourselves.
And comes to town.
I'm really starting to wonder what that situation is all about. Is this really is it contract related, or like I don't know. But I haven't read or heard anything except he's not in town, Yeah. And it's that's something that's always kind of a concern when you have a young player. I don't know if it's less of a concern with a defensive player missing out on some of this stuff early on. But I don't know. I almost feel like the silence is a little bit more concerning to me than anything else, honestly.
I agree with that. I agree. It's a deafening silence from kind of that camp. Because is he the only one of their draft picks who's not signed?
That I don't know. I don't have that in front of me off the top of my head. Right now, I'm trying to look for... Okay, so I did want to kind of just give us some props on basically the first few rounds.
Sure.
Because, like we talked about, after round 3, it's start throws. So, Greg, you were correct in the projection that they would take a tackle with the first pick.
Yes, I was.
I think we were in agreement that they would take a tackle. I don't think either of us really considered Lomu a true candidate for them. Both in terms of him being, we both thought that he would get drafted sooner. And sure. Elliot Wolf said the same thing about him, himself too, being surprised that he was there. And I wasn't sure that he was quite the kind of guy that they were looking for. We were talking about like Ianachor, who's a bigger, more physical kind of guy.
Of a man, yeah.
Or even like Blake Miller, who another bigger, stronger kind of guy. So you also were dead on about them drafting Gay Bacchus in the second round. So bravo to you.
When I got that text when I was on vacation from you, that it seemed like it was genuine excitement from you that was the pick that had happened, and not even really thinking that was a guy that I had picked in my mock, but he was just sort of one of those guys that it seemed like every mock and everything that I'd heard that was the kind of kid that they were going to take if he was there. And how you had described it to me about how they were trying to get in on the end of a run for certain players, and the fact that he was sitting there and they were able to trade up and take him was, it was very interesting. It's weird that the Patriots trade up in drafts now a little bit. That they identify guys that they want and they go up and get them. With Lomu and with Akis, and it's very interesting because I didn't really watch the draft this year, so it was sort of it was sort of Maza leading the blind a little bit, in terms of my interaction with it. But when the Patriots are decisive when it comes to draft prospects, and certainly in the first two picks they were decisive and assertive, and that's certainly not something those are not two adjectives I would have used to describe Elliott Wolf. Certainly in the Belichick years, and definitely the Mayo year, that was definitely just not an attribute that I thought the guy had. So kudos to Elliott.
No, yeah, and I think that when I first brought this up to you, I was just some of this feels a little like they were picking at the end of runs, and the first thing that came to my mind was Caden Wallace, but in that case they missed the run, and so they ended up drafting a player higher than higher than they should have, because they had to take a guy at that point. So I think that there was an application of a lesson there, that the way that they read the run. Let's face it, where Iannachor went, where Miller went, they weren't going to be able to trade that high up to get them without mortgaging a lot. So, but being able to recognize, hey, Lomu is a guy here who is talented. He's a guy that we can work with. This isn't a stretch to call him a first round pick. Let's go get him so that we are not on the outside looking in like we have been in the past. And then doing the same again in the second round. I like you said, it's a credit to Elliott Wolf and his staff, honestly, in a way, learning from past mistakes.
Yeah, it was I think that's so interesting to me that it seemed like they were just you know what, we're not going to get burned again. We're gonna look at this differently. And yeah. I don't know if you've watched any of the Forged in Foxborough, the newest one that came out a few weeks ago. Shout out to our guy Matisse Bauman he's one of the production guys working on that on those, and they're very, very good. But by
the way, Matisse, if you're listening, we'd love to talk to you.
Yes, we would. But what I loved about that was how, and it's probably editing and sort of how they built it, that Lomu was a guy that they targeted pretty much right away at the combine. That they talked to him and they had these discussions, and they're like, that's it. That's the guy. And I think body type wise, he's interesting. He's not as short armed as Campbell is, but they both project as that very athletic type of tackle, which was certainly not something we ever thought of, this team would be targeting. But I think considering the athletes you have on the field at this point, it makes some sense. And then the other guy that was really sort of like that was Akis. Was that they had targeted him pretty much from the beginning, and I got a sense that was a guy that Mike Vrabel was excited about, and had sort of that love at first sight kind of thing with Campbell the year before, but with Akis. There's a great clip of him talking to Robert Kraft about Akis, and explaining, was he's a state champion wrestler, and they're watching highlight film, almost as if he's kind of, reasoning with his boss on this is the guy we're going to take. We really like him. Here's why you should.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the only reason why Akis surprised me a little bit was because Elliot Wolf had talked about wanting to get faster on the edge. And while Akis is not a slow guy, he doesn't have that speed, that kind of bend, that ability to like, really get around the edge the way, like a Howell or our Mason Thomas may have, but I think that you're absolutely right that he's a fit for Mike Vrabel. I think that you're absolutely right. He's that tough, gritty Mike Vrabel kind of guy. Yeah, go ahead, crack that next. Was it a Miller?
Yep,
Miller Lite.
Miller time.
Yeah, there you go.
It's Miller time.
Cheers. But yeah, so I really think that the only hang up that I had was he's not that speed element that he was looking for, at least from Elliot Wolf's point of view. But he does bring that other thing that they were talking about was violence, suddenness.
Yeah.
He brings a ton of that. So once he gets in here, he'll start bringing that. So let's knock on wood about that. So I'm going to give myself some kudos, and I'll readily admit that I'm reaching a little bit more on these. The things that I got correct in the first few rounds, I projected that they were going to trade up from 63 to make a pick in the 50s. So I was right on that. And with that, they drafted Gabe Akis. I was correct in that they were going to draft an edge rusher in the second round, but I think I had Cassius Howell as that
I think you did
pick.
too.
I was correct in that they drafted a tight end at 95. I am okay with that pick. I'm okay with Raridon. I don't love it. I saw
I have
enough
a theory why you don't.
I saw enough Notre Dame football.
That's my theory.
To kind of be like, this guy, just so many times for a guy with his physical skill set to like not be visible on the field, to not have a presence, to have, and now some of it is, of course, you had you had the top two running backs in the draft. So some of that, I was a little taken back by the fact that I don't think he had a touchdown. Like, he was not a red zone threat at all. But when you have Jeremiah Love doing like what he did to Penn State in the playoff, why do you need to throw the ball in the red zone? So, but I just, and it's the end of the third round. So you're getting towards that edge of fourth round, where it's more traits and dart throws and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that I always thought could be showing more. And college is always weird with tight ends. They don't always know how to use them or how to, implement them in strange offenses, but I just, there was always a sense that this guy could be more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am with that. The last thing that I got, and then I'll throw it to you because I know you said that you had a theory. But the last thing that I got
we absolutely talked about pretty much like you said it off the rip of what basically you vocalized. My theory was that I think you were so close to watching so much Notre Dame football that I think that you were almost too close to that pick, that like it was sort of one of those you can't see the forest through the trees sort of scenarios, that like you watched him enough that you also like,
Yeah. I think there's some of that. I think the other thing that I forgot to mention too is on that Notre Dame passing offense, I mean, who else were there in terms of targets? You had, now I'm blanking on his name. Kid who was also in the draft. Malachi Fields. Thank you. I kept wanting to say
I
Malachi
did so
Lawrence,
many of
and I
those
knew that
drafts.
wasn't right.
These are names that I'm just going to know.
But yeah, it was Malachi Fields, and who else? I mean, a bunch of perfectly fine college football players, but a guy with his size and skill set, you would think would have drawn more targets. But yeah. So the last thing to pat myself on the back on is I was correct that they made back-to-back trades involving their first 2 picks. Now, I did think that they were going to trade out of the first round, so I was right that they moved those first 2 picks. So that's what we got right.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Movement is still movement.
Which compared to, I think compared to some teams or some prognosticators, we did pretty okay.
Yeah. Did we? But it was. I mean, if we talk a little bit about sort of some of the depth guys that they had drafted, I say depth guys, like later round guys. That I think certainly a guy that we both like that they took was Demetrius Crownover, who's a gigantic tackle, and to get him as late as they did, like we were seeing in mocks certainly that we had done that he was 3rd, 4th round ish. Getting him in the 5th or 6th was pretty darn great.
No, yeah, I agree. I think that was, there were a lot of the, as expected, a lot of the later round picks were kind of just like, okay. It had kind of been projected that some of these later round picks in other drafts might have been priority free agents. So, but Crownover was one that was just like, man, when you're talking about, like I've talked about several times, those later rounds being about drafting for traits, this guy's got traits, what he doesn't have is any consistency. From what I understand, the thing is, like, he'll have reps where he looks phenomenal, and then there will be other reps where it looks like he's never played football before. So, yeah, but no, I think that is one of the more intriguing picks that they made late in the game.
I agree, and I think another guy who was late that I really liked, because I watch a lot of college football. I'm growing up in Western Mass. I'm kind of college football agnostic. Like, I don't really have a team. I'll watch a lot of teams because, like, as the season goes on, I'll be like, oh, they're mean and fun. I'll absolutely watch them. and that was last year's Texas Tech team. They were 4th in the nation, kind of going into the playoff, and they play just a mean but fun brand of football. And I think the Patriots taking a flyer on Baron Morton, who was tough as nails last year. Dude took a ton of hits and, like, led them on offense. Like, they were a powerhouse on defense. But Morton is just one of those kinds of quarterbacks who's just like, oh no, I've taken a beating. I can hold a clipboard for sure. And then learning an offense like this one is good for him. Like, I think if at some point the Tommy DeVito kind of shtick doesn't land after a year or two, you can move on, and you've got a guy like Baron Morton who when I watched him a lot on that Texas Tech team was just good. Wasn't gonna, light your hair on fire with, like, big plays or anything, but was just solid and consistent.
Alrighty, I guess that's all you can really say about a 7th round pick is that you hope that he can be solid and consistent.
For sure, and late round picks like that are magic beans too. Like, right? They're just,
yep.
You don't know what you have.
All right. So speaking of magic, turning over, we're gonna kind of do a little bit more of a lightning round with the other teams.
Love it.
But is there any magic to be found in the Boston Red Sox 2026 season? I mean, since we were last talking, I mean that we've gone through a complete, almost complete change of the coaching staff. Unless you are buddies with the president of baseball operations, etc.
Yeah.
And they're still bad.
They're not good.
And unfortunately, the people that they primarily fired were people on the side of the game that is still really the struggle, which is the offense. I mean, they just are not a team that can consistently get on base and cannot consistently score runs. I mean, they're just really inept at crossing home plate. It's really boggling, especially. And now I'll give credit. The pitching staff is kind of, as far as that's been constructed, has been pretty good. I mean, Sonny Gray has been everything and more that you could have hoped for at this point. The young
Ranger
kids.
Suarez.
The young kids have been doing well. Ranger Suarez, I was never really worried about. He got shelled a couple of early appearances, but it's just like, he's a guy who, as long as, the defense is able to back him up, because he's not going to miss a ton of bats, is going to be fine. Obviously,
and he pitches backwards too, which is fun.
And obviously Garrett Crochet getting hurt, and there was clearly something wrong before he actually went on the injured list. It certainly puts even more of a damper on the season. But they've still, from a pitching standpoint, have been pretty much as competitive as you could ask them to be. So I mean, but then when you look at the way that the offense is letting them down, it's really staggering. So I mean, I guess it just kind of reaffirms what we suspected in the beginning, was just like, hey, maybe it wasn't the coaching staff. Maybe the fact that they have scored more runs than only Kansas City, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and San Diego this season has more to do with the way you've constructed this team and constructed this lineup than it was what the coaching staff was able to do with what they were given. I mean, this team is just like, their OPS as a team is like 700 as a team. It's really. By the way, if the league, it's like 15 points below the league average. So even to break into league average, they would have to have a serious run of quality at bats that they aren't having. So, you can argue that the results have been a little bit better. I think that Alex Cora was 10-17 when they canned him. Chad Tracy is now 16-18. So, sure, there's been some kind of improvement, but you are still looking at a team that is 26-35 and has 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 teams right now between them and the last wild card spot. Like, right now, the odds of them making the postseason is about 25%. Yeah. You're the Boston Red Sox. Don't tell me this whole, we got to be patient because we got the young guys, etc. You're the Boston Red Sox. You want to develop young talent? You can absolutely do that. You are one of the teams that has the ability to develop young talent while still supporting it with quality veteran play. And they just haven't done that.
It's interesting because I think what the Red Sox have done with constructing this roster, that they were banking on all of these players to have kind of their like 95th percentile kinds of seasons. They were banking on Roman Anthony to be an MVP candidate. They were banking on Marcelo Meyer to potentially be a Rookie of the Year. They were banking on Caleb Durbin to be the kind of player that he was a year ago. They're banking on so many of these different things. They were banking on Jarren Duran to be, you know, a competent 3-hitter. You know, I've seen him. I was at the game last night, and I've never seen a guy more comfortable to be the leadoff guy than Duran. They shouldn't have screwed with him in the beginning of the year in the first place. But like, I'm looking at the stats now for this year's team, and there are two guys who have double-digit homers. And then their third guy for home runs this season is Willie Bray with 7. My question to you is, who is next in terms of home runs on this team? If you're looking it up right now,
No, I'm trying to think who's played enough games at this point. Is it Trevor Story?
No, it's Cedar Rafaela.
How many?
Who's been great. He has 5 home runs this year.
All right.
And he's like, I think they just built this team to be like, well, if everything goes perfect, we're going to be nasty. And then like everybody, and then the train didn't even leave the station to start the year. And then they did the, you know, 27 games in, canning Cora and the rest of that coaching staff, and they've replaced it with a minor league coaching staff. Like, what were you expecting?
Yeah.
So I just kind of wonder what like the plan is. You know, we might not see it for a while because there's a good chance we don't have baseball next year with the CBA negotiations. So we're at least going to have a little bit of some simmer time with this team. I will say too, the guys that we haven't talked about who have been great. First and foremost for me is Peyton Tolley. Peyton Tolley is a breath of fresh air. He's got a little bit of that like Jonathan Papelbon, you know, happy idiot thing.
Yeah, that weirdo thing going for him that works.
Yeah, and like this team kind of needs a weirdo. And Peyton Tolley is the perfect fun weirdo that this team needs. Like he's got this like big like 1980s hockey player street sweeper mustache and like laughs in press conferences on a team that stinks. He's been fantastic. It's too bad that kind of the rookie of the year race is a little stacked with Munetaka Murakami in Chicago swatting 1 billion home runs. Because if Tolley could kind of mount a rookie of the year chase, he'd be awesome. Like he'd be a really great little like fun face of baseball. But you know, after I was at the game last night and just him doing that weird little leap, trying to get a ball that was over his head, and then like it would have absolutely infuriated my grandfather, who's the reason I'm a Red Sox fan. Like he was such a big Red Sox fan, and really wanted them to be serious and play baseball. But the balk last night, where he literally said that he had a brain fart, that it was the perfect explanation of just like, no brain there, man. I wasn't even in my head. It just kind of happened. And like to laugh that off on a team where stuff's just not going right was so refreshing to me. Like if this was 2012 with the Valentine stuff, like I don't know that John Lester would have been able to like laugh off something like that. They would have been like so pissed about it. But what I just love that they have a guy who's just like, I play Major League Baseball for a living. This is insane. I never would have thought this. I was hitting in college a couple years ago. Like, what do I have to be mad about? It's great.
Right.
He's like the only big bright spot. It's like he and Suarez and Early and Gray. The Bayo thing doesn't make sense to me. He got shelled again today.
Yeah.
But they got to figure that whole thing out at some point. I almost wonder if he's a change of scenery candidate at some point. Like he and Duran potentially in a deal for a right-handed bat.
So I was going to do a quick exercise with you on this, actually. I was going to ask you the percentage Like, what percent would you put it that this player is on a different roster by the end of the year?
Great. Let's do
Okay.
it.
All right. And I had a few of them. Masa Yoshida.
He should
I know. I started
be.
with a hard one.
He should be, because he's just not getting the. He's just not getting the, the playing time here. I had said to my buddy Charlie, who I went to the game with last night, when he had like a single like into the gap last night, of like, if they paid him 5 for 50 instead of 5 for 90 with that contract, he'd be the biggest bargain in baseball, because he doesn't strike out. All he does is he makes good contact. He doesn't walk, but I wish he did. Like, he's a guy, like, if there was a team that needed just like a very good contact hitter, he'd be perfect there. Like, he also would help the outfield logjam. I just don't know that there's anybody who would take him. Maybe Heim Bloom would be interested in a reunion in St. Louis, but I don't see it because they're playing really well.
Well, and I mean,
So I'll give I'll give it 20%.
He's a guy who I thought, when you looked at in the offseason this last year, when you had that logjam, he was a guy who should move. So the should versus the will he clearly do not always line up. All right, next one is Jarren Duran.
$54. I think it's a little over half. Because if the San Diego Padres just want to give up something crazy for him, I'm fine with that. If they want to give up, and I don't know who they would give up, because they're having they're having a crappy year too. But like, if they give up, I don't know, maybe Luis Camposano or like a change of scenery guy on their end. If they, my kingdom for Fernando Tatis Jr., I would be less psyched about Manny Machado, but like, or even if it was old friend Xander Bogaerts, that contract stinks. It stinks. But if they brought him back, like, they kind of need a grown up, and he's a grown up. So I would say like 54%. And San Diego's probably where he'd go.
I think it's less than that, simply because he doesn't have a lot of value right now. He doesn't. This is a guy you should have traded 2 years ago. You should have struck when the iron was hot. Yeah. And he's always like, I love the way that he plays. I love his effort, but he's not a good outfielder. Right now, he's
terrible.
He's not hitting very well. You can't play him at DH because you've got another guy in Yoshida who has to DH because he can't play the outfield very well either. So you, and he's not hitting very well at this point. He's one of these try hard guys who, burns hot and fast, and so I think his window is already kind of closing. I mean, you look at it, he's not a young kid too, when you think about it. I mean, he's somebody who's trading for him is essentially trading for a 30-year-old outfielder who's batting .220 and can't play the outfield. So I think it's a lot lower unless there reaches a point where he's just like, get me out of here. Which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think that's his personality. Okay. Let's see. Where's my list? Aroldis Chapman.
75%. I mean,
I put it at 90.
Yeah, like between 75 and 90%. What does this team need an elite closer for? Like, and then you give the job to Whitlock as like the closer of the future, which he should be. But like, if they can get anything of value for Chapman, they should. I kind of wonder if like there's a movement on a like Chapman Duran package somewhere. San Diego makes sense. And then that would kind of create just a bullpen, just arsenal with Mason Miller, and I think Josh Hader. Is Hader there? No, Hader's in Houston. Sorry. Had to baseball nerd within my own head there for a second. But it's just very interesting, kind of, that they have this trade chip, and how they haven't started selling now is insane. Like I don't know. They don't need a closer like that. They've got Slayton and Whitlock, and on a team that's this bad, like you just kind of live with.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that Whitlock's injury, excuse me, Whitlock's injury has kind of put a damper on some of those plans. But all right, I've got 2 more pitchers for you here, and then we'll move on quickly to. I know this was supposed to be a lightning round too, but it always gets away from us. All right, so one guy who we talked about at length already, Brian Bayo.
Oh, I don't know that you could even think about trading Brian Bayo, because he's so bad. His comments today, after getting just absolutely lit up, like it just didn't make sense to be like, we're not talking about the bullpen. We're not talking about this. I'm a starter. It's what I've always done. And maybe there's like some like translator issues there, like some interpreter issues, but I don't know that they can. I'm gonna say like 2%, because that contract stinks too. It's not as bad as the Christian Campbell contract. The Christian Campbell contract is immovable. I don't know what they're gonna do with him. Like
Remember when we thought that was a steal?
Yeah. Oh my God. Like if he played as well as he did like in April, as consistently, like it would be like, this is the biggest bargain in baseball. And now it's turning into Rusney Castillo 2.
All right, one more for you. Sonny Gray.
I don't want it to happen. 42%. I think, I mean, if there's a contender who could take on Sonny Gray and give back a decent prospect that maybe could do something for you, I would be all in. But I think he's been kind of a great veteran for the young kids, for Early and Tolley specifically. I look at it with Tolley specifically, when Gray was young and he played in New York after Oakland sold him off a couple of years after those first really good years, that like I think it's good that they have a veteran who doesn't, who's been through some stuff and is just like, guys, this is baseball, it's fun. Like, what are we like, have fun. And I think having a leader like that is a good thing for them, but it's another one of these things of like, why do you need to have this guy?
Well, I think that
Crochet comes back, he slots right in.
I would argue that this is the guy who you just argued that you do need him a little bit. Now, maybe not for wins and losses, but you look at what the contract is. It's an affordable contract with the way they restructured it. So that, he's basically something like $30 million this year, and then like $30 million option next year.
For next year, yeah.
So it's for a pitcher who's pitching as well as he is, it's an affordable contract. It's a guy who's proven to have some value to your bullpen, to your dugout in your locker room. And, so I would think that somebody would really have to convince you to part with him. So it would have to be a pretty sweet deal as far as I'm concerned.
and I just don't know who that is. Like maybe there's a contender in July who just needs something else. Maybe it's
that one more arm.
One more arm. I wonder if it's a like, because it's weird because the American League is so bad. Like I wonder if it's, if it's a. I haven't looked at the standings in a while, but I wonder if it's like thing.
The Red Sox are this is another thing that we've got to consider here. They're 4 games out of the final wild card spot. With as many teams that are above them, they're only 4 games out, which is wild to me. I think that the number of teams in front of them makes that 4 more like that 4 isn't really 4. It's a more significant gap.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But the fact that it's only 4 games, it's just wild. So, that may have there may be just like this glimmer in the back of Breslow's head that he's just like, oh, hey, they might actually be able to prove that I was right when I said that this was still a playoff team.
Yeah, it's I'm looking at the standings now they're like, oh my God, you can count on one hand the amount of teams that are over 500 in the American League. Seattle, the White Sox, who are really fun, Cleveland, the Yankees, and the Rays. It's 5 teams out of 15. It's not going to make sense. Like somebody's just going to get, if somebody just has like a hot July or August, and it could be the Red Sox, they could, but they've got to, the one thing that I don't trust with this Red Sox team, and specifically with Craig Breslow, we're going to trust this guy to make a desperation move at the deadline to save his own job. I don't know. He's going to give up too much to get, I don't know. Let's use Tatis as the example. I don't want him to give up any of the really good prospects to do this. Like, I think Franklin Arias should be untouchable. But if he's so desperate to save his job and keep being the chief baseball operations guy, I don't know. Like, your chief baseball officer, I just don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. There are certain guys that I'm just like, I'm very much and I meant to say this off the top with the AJ Brown talk. I'm more of an F those picks kind of guy. I'm also an F those prospects kind of guy. Give me the known commodity. And I'm not saying go blow it up, David Dombrowski style, though that did produce a championship.
Sure did.
What I'm saying is you have a pretty good idea who the guys in your farm system are that you think are going to fit what you're looking to do. And then there's everybody on the outside who's scouting your guys. Mm-hmm. How many of these trades where you're trading, 3 or 4 prospects, even if they're like in like your top or 15 organizational prospects, are actually panning out and the other team is just like, I just got 3 foundational pieces to my team by giving you X superstar. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather chip those guys off. I don't think he'll do it. I don't. I don't think he will. I think that he's said enough in his he's drawn his line in the sand that this is my way, this is the way that it's going to work, and it's very much we're gonna throw it to it's funny because it's like throw it to the young kids. They're a league average in terms of their team age at like 28 and a quarter or something like that. So they've got some really young guys, and then you've got some other guys like Chapman and Yoshida, and even like we said, Duran is 29, almost 30. So you have these other guys that are dragging that average up. The problem is those veteran guys, for the most part, especially on outside of like the pitching staff, have been the wrong guys. So that's a bit of a tangent, but essentially I don't buy that he is going to pull the trigger and sacrifice some of his prospects that, that he hoards and beloves, the same way that Danny Ainge loved second round picks, I just don't buy it that he would actually pull the trigger on that. So even if it gets to a point where, the team is hot, he'll be like, well, see, my guys are doing it. And that would be that. And, they'd ride it out. And maybe that's,
exactly.
it's been outside of the sports world. It's been a rough week. So maybe I'm just a little extra salty and cynical, but that's, I don't buy him. I don't buy the approach. If I think that he's totally a wait and see kind of guy, and this isn't a wait and see kind of town.
No, it isn't. And like the level of patience that this town would have, they just don't have it after the last 5-6 years what they've been through with this team. And the more we get away from it, I wonder if that 21 playoff run that kind of came out of nowhere and the 25 playoff run last year are similar, of just kind of these like, oh my God, we lucked into something and we're just not going to replicate it, or we're not going to or we're not going to give it air to breathe kind of thing. So I don't know. It's very interesting. I wonder if
the Mac Jones rookie season of baseball seasons.
Actually, it's a good comp for it. I thought, and I don't know if you read it. If you haven't, you should. Tim Healy in the Boston Globe wrote a whole piece about, are the Red Sox better off with Craig Breslow? And one of the kind of anecdotes in there that I found very interesting was one from Theo Epstein, who pushed very hard for Craig Breslow to get the job in Boston. I thought it very interesting of him being like, the team is relying too much on the analytics. If you recall, the Epstein, helmed Red Sox had a good mix of both. He had Bill LaJoie as an assistant general manager who was an old head who had been around, had been to the puppet show and seen the strings, kind of an old assistant GM. And this team, he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have he doesn't have a sounding board that isn't Theo, and Theo's not dealing with the Red Sox operation. I'm sure, as you see him wearing my Liverpool shirt, I'm sure that he had some discussions about what Liverpool went through the last couple of weeks with their managerial change too. So he's being pulled in a bunch of different directions, but it's very interesting to me of the idea that the guy who's running the ship for the Red Sox is so analytically minded that the team is looking to find an English to English translator for the guy who's running their baseball operation.
Yeah.
And that got put in the newspaper that the owner owns. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, I think if you dive deep enough into the conspiracy, it makes perfect sense in that, this is John Henry laying the seeds so that, it's less of a surprise when he cans him. And, because now I think that the narrative is switching, and some of this, And this isn't questioning the reporting at all. I think that there's merit to it. I think that the reporting is saying a lot of what people had suppositions about in the first place. But the focus has kind of gone away from, we talked about it the last time you were on, the chance of sell the team. The ire has shifted squarely to Craig Breslow. So, and I don't think that it's necessarily a coincidence that the paper that the owner of the Red Sox owns had something that was really this damning in it. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think that it's more than reasonable to understand why that happened. All right. So we could talk about this again for another hour. But now we're going to go really quick lightning round. I'm just going to say the Boston Bruins, I think they are who we thought they were, in that they were a fun team who could have a puncher's chance against a team in the opening round in the playoffs. And their goalie gave him that punching chance in the playoffs.
Swayman was great.
And, it was just that they just beat a team that played, or they were beat by a team that played better than them.
Totally. It's very interesting. At the beginning of the year, it felt like this roster was constructed as oops, all third and fourth liners plus Pasta. And I think it's very interesting because the free agency class this year is super weak. It's a weak free agency. Someone is going to pay a ton for Darren Radish. And I hope it's not Don Sweeney, who, for a defenseman who had kind of a out of nowhere offensive season. And, especially watching the Stanley Cup final, which Vegas is already up in game 2, which is disgusting. But seeing how these teams that are just so well rounded and play this defensively responsible game, that I think there you can at least see after watching the Bruins this year, you can see where they want to go. That they want to be a team, certainly like Carolina, that just plays such a defensive, a defensively frustrating game against an opponent. I think the Bruins want to do that, and I think it's interesting that they found the right coach in Sturm, who I wasn't quite sure that was going to be the case. And I think they need a top line centerman. The Elias Lindholm experiment, it's not it. It's not. Maybe that top centerman, maybe it's Hagens, maybe it's Fraser Minton. I lean Minton more than Hagens just because we saw him in a full season. And, the reports out of the World Championships with Canada that he was super impressive. Playing on a team with Celebrini and Sidney Crosby. That I think the future for the Bruins is a lot brighter than we thought. They've got 16 million-ish in cap space coming into the offseason. And if they're able to swing a trade for a playmaker, whether it's a winger or a centerman for Pasta, he's not getting any younger. He told the Boston media on breakup day, I'm not getting any younger. And I think they need to get him a playmaker who can get him the puck and let him be, the best player that he can be. David Pastrnak is one of the best players in the league when he's mostly scoring goals. This year, he was so sneaky excellent because he was passing more and he was trying to do more things than he normally does. But I just kind of wonder what the team has in store when we get to July 1 for the offseason. Not getting the Leafs first round pick hurts that a little bit. Leave it to Toronto to get a can't miss prospect at 1 that I don't even know if they're going to draft Gavin McKenna. They should. I would. But if they do something different, like get, one of the 2 top defensemen, which maybe stylistically they should, but I think for the Bruins having kind of that easy exit ramp to start a really great offseason, not having that complicates things. But I wonder if they do something along the lines of trading for a player who's unhappy where they are. Guy I think of, he just announced, or it was just reported today that he asked for a trade, and that's Dylan Larkin from Detroit. That would be the perfect centerman for David Pastrnak. And he's an American Olympian. He's got a no trade, so I wonder sort of what places that would be. It would be soul crushing if he decided to go to Vegas with, all of those guys and they figure out how to circumvent the cap again. But, I wonder if the Bruins are going to be really active on the trade market.
Oh, that's very possible. I mean, I will say Twitter does not necessarily agree with you that the Bruins' future is bright. I mean, from what I understand, the fact that the Providence got upset by Springfield in the Calder Cup playoffs just proves that the entire operation is fraudulent from the top down. So
I wonder, I sort of had this thought of if there were teams that wanted to interview Ryan Muginel for assistant coaching jobs, I got the sense that the Bruins would not step in the way of that after sort of how the collapse against Springfield had transpired. And it's weird how they are with prospects, though.
AHL,
some of it doesn't make sense.
AHL playoffs are weird too. I mean, the whole setup is weird. There are times where, like, even whether or not you get a home game depends on how far the 2 teams are. Like Springfield did not have a game, a home game in the first round because they were playing Charlotte. And because Charlotte is more than, I think it's 500 miles away, they played the entire series in Charlotte.
That's stupid.
It's to cut down on travel costs so that both teams aren't. So, yeah. So AHL playoffs are weird anyway. So, if you're looking at how a team that, by the way, they sent some guys down. All these teams that end up getting kicked out of the playoffs or don't make the playoffs end up kicking up, some of their younger guys down. So suddenly the dynamics on all of these teams are changing in the playoffs. Sure. It's just weird. If you're actually trying to judge what the organization looks like based off whether or not they made a deep run in the Calder Cup, you're looking at the wrong thing. I had a ton of fun, following the Springfield. Of course, we're based in Springfield here. The goalie was just insane for basically every game except for the last one where they gave up 8 goals. But he was the reason why they, were in basically every game. But anyway, nobody cares about the minor league hockey team in Springfield. So, but it was just a joke that I had to throw in there. Okay, this one is all you, and I know that we've been saying lightning round here. Let's keep this as concise as possible here. Which upsets you more? The fact that the Celtics had an early exit from the NBA playoffs, or that the Knicks are in the NBA finals?
That the Celtics bowed out early. I don't dislike the New York Knicks. I don't. I'm a big proponent of teams that haven't won a championship in a while, specifically for like fan bases that haven't seen their teams win a championship. My dad turned 70 in October, and he was in high school. He might have been a freshman or sophomore in high school when the Knicks won those back-to-back championships in the early 70s. Think about that. And so there are kids I went to college with. I have a friend who's from New York. I don't know which borough, and I'm not going to say it because I don't want to get.
You don't want to insult him.
I don't want my friend Kelly to insult me, or thinking that I've insulted her. But and she's one of those friends who like she's so psyched about the Knicks, and it's. I remember what it was like when the Patriots won their first Super Bowl and went to the those early first couple of Super Bowls, and just how fun it is that your team is there. So I can't be one of those people who's gonna rain on someone's parade when my team couldn't even show up in a Game 7 against the godforsaken Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know. It's weird because I think the Celtics have also played so many games over the last several playoff runs that they just sort of, I don't know, the train was going to come to an abrupt halt at some point. Whether this offseason is one of those where they break up the Jays, I don't know. But it's going to be interesting sort of how they move forward.
Alrighty. Well, Greg, we covered a lot in approximately an hour and a half. We've definitely gone longer and rambled more, but, I'm certainly glad that we were able to recap everything that's happened really since the last time you were on, which was just before you were going on your trip across the pond.
Yes.
And of course, we mentioned a little bit how you were kind of watching the draft from afar and vicariously through me. So in the next thing we're going to talk about, which will be part of our next episode,
yes,
we're going to be talking about your trip to England and talking about the things you saw, the experiences you had, the vibes you chased. And so I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait to discuss that with you. It was a really great trip, and it's going to be really great to, tell a friend about my vacation in person sort of detail compared to, just a string of Facebook messages that we send back and forth.
Alrighty. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. This was actually a lot of fun. Why do I say actually? Greg and I always have a great time when we're talking sports. Truthfully, I think you get a little bit more of a sanitized version when we are on the podcast, because a lot of times when we are interacting, offline, off air or whatever you want to call it, it gets a little saltier. So, that we certainly don't agree on everything, but I think that we, between the two of us, give you a pretty good idea of, what the perspective is of the sports fan who isn't completely brainwashed by New England sports talk radio, which is just absolute poison. What isn't poison is the amount of support that you guys give the podcast week in and week out. It is actually invigorating. It is awesome, and it is exciting. So if you are looking to support us, obviously the best way is telling your friends to listen. If you have an idea for a podcast as well, you can always reach out to us. You can find us on our Facebook community, The Musin Place. You can also find us on Facebook. We have a regular Facebook page. We also have Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Maza's Musings Pod, TikTok, Maza's Musings Podcast. We are also on Blue Sky, and we have the YouTube channel that we would love it for you to subscribe to. Excuse me. Woo, getting a little ahead of myself. You can find all of that information and more on our website, mazasmusings.wordpress.com. You'll find past episodes there, a little bit more about me and this podcast, and you will learn how to sign up for the newsletter, which will come once a week in your inbox And yep, it will be full of all kinds of great things. Been a little bit behind on the newsletter lately, and I apologize for that, but I'm looking to get back on track. So a lot of times I have a lot of cool information there, including contests, sweepstakes, things like that you can take advantage of. And so feel free to sign up for that. Of course, when you're looking for us on your favorite podcatcher, while you're there, be sure to give us a rating or review. That will help bump us up in those algorithms that make us more discoverable to more people. And if you're looking to bump up your support just a little bit more while you're on the website, you can find the button to buy us a blue milk. And buying us a blue milk is just a small, obligation-free way to help us with some of the small costs that go into putting this podcast together. And whether you are buying us a blue milk, listening for the first time, everything in between, thanks for listening. I hope you have a great weekend and a great week. For the Maza's Musings podcast is brought to you by Hi Dad Soup. Check them out at Mickey and Minutes on Instagram.